Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being able to join us on this great Friday morning. I'm so excited to be here with all of you. And in this session, as we have Cameron Hall here. He's a product storyteller, bringing together imagination and uh, machination without jargon. Okay, so Cameron uses his experience in app and analytics strategy for healthcare, finance, government, and logistics apps with a focus on emerging technologies to deliver on customer-centric product development. He's a strategist and a technologist, and we're very happy to have him here. So with that said, Cameron, I'm going to turn it over to you. Oh, and Julie, I'm sorry, Julie, and Julie Bright. Julie Bright's
No,
also.
I'm clapping for Cameron. I'm not like, pay attention to me.
Okay, no, you know what? But I wanted, Julie's also,
clapping.
yeah, Julie Bright's also. For those of you who don't know me, by the way, I'm Gil Pisano. I've said it a couple of times, so forgive me. I'm on the board of Agile Richmond. Happy to have you here. Julie Bright is also in Agile Richmond, and we're both going to be helping take care of things in the background. And with that said, uh, we're going to pass it over to Cameron. Cameron, are you all ready?
I am. I have to show my video here in a minute. Do you mind making Mason also a co-host?
Mason, sure thing.
Surprise.
Done.
Yeah, yeah. The form only let me put one person in, but it's going to be both of us, which will be great. And with that in mind, we'll show our video here in a second. But if everybody, for this particular talk, I feel like it's like putting on your 3D glasses, but if you want to switch to speaker view, so that way you can see, it'll switch to whoever's talking between the two of us. It'll help with the immersion and the experience. So that should give you an indication of the rest of the talk. So that being said, is it pinned to you, Mason, or is it showing?
I see your screen.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure. Great. Welcome, everybody. We have our talk today on how we launched an app in the middle of COVID. And so you'll be hearing from me and Mason Brown. So very excited to talk with you guys. This is, we're happy to be back and happy to make this work in COVID. But yeah, really excited to jump in. So first and foremost, hello. We are your pre-lunch speakers. So we have the difficult task of not only being another Zoom call for some people, but also being the pre-lunch Zoom call. So we're going to make this different and weird and exciting, but also informative. So hold on, here we go. With that, your weird MCs here. I'm Cameron. I work at Workpath, which is a healthcare startup here in Richmond, down in Scott's Addition. And I am a product manager there, have been for the past year. I've also worked previously at places like Capital One, also down in Fort Lee, all over the place. So that intro, thank you so much, Gil, is just speaking to the weird Rolodex of experience I have in product. So very excited to share that with you guys, and I will hand it over to Mason.
My name is Mason Brown. I'm a product strategist at a company in town called Shaco. We're a mobile development company. Cameron worked with me, now it was a few years ago, and we've been attached at the hip ever since. And we're going to talk through some of our stuff we've been working on and our ideas around product.
And with that, we, like Mason mentioned, like we are the folks who are wiring up dashboards. We're the folks who are looking at research, setting up conversations with real users, speaking to people who actually use the products. We've led focus groups. We've walked through piles of data just to kind of make sense of things. So we love doing this stuff. We volunteer for it with Star Virginia. We volunteer for it on our own outside of work fun projects. So yeah, we love doing this stuff. But like any good drama, we start with a flashback. We've actually been to, spoke at Innovate Virginia a few years ago, and last time we were there, we had a fun activity with Legos, solo cups, and an envelope full of coins where, for those of you who attended that session, it involved pushing the envelope, literally creating a Lego thing to push an envelope across the table. And with that, we're sad we can't be with you guys in person again to do something weird and fun like that. But we actually thought we could incorporate some weirdness by using our fancy tool. So here's me on top of
Here's
my
me.
face.
Oh, look, it's just like last time.
Live and in person-ish. So yeah, we're excited to kind of walk through this with you. It'll jump between us whenever each of us is talking. But yeah, we're going to walk through this. No Legos this time, no envelopes, but we have some fun things to show you. With that, starting us off, let me move my face out of the way here. And you might be able to see my Star Wars poster in the background for fun. Hello. So this talk, like where we want to start with where we started, which is why we even did this at all, and talking to you about like what this problem is, why we even started down this road of making an app if we're two product people. And it really started with, as we all had this kind of realization last spring, which is, taking a long look at what we're doing and day to day, and really like how do we then change that into something that we can contribute to a post-COVID world. Everything from, you look at telehealth, obviously we're on Zoom a lot more. It's just like we're all in this place. Like those of us who are creators really thought about like, well, how can I contribute? Like you see all these neat things that are being added, like the amount of features and weird breaks that Zoom and Google Meet had over the course of the year is just fascinating, because there's just a lot of that. That was just one source, but there were so many different sources of people just trying to contribute to this post-COVID world. With that, we'll talk to you about the problem that we were trying to solve. So we could talk you through this problem exclusively, but we figured it'd be helpful to see it via some funny tweets and images. So first of all, I'm going to disappear, get out of the way. How many people have experienced this issue where you have this either like a screenshot that you need for a ticket or like a funny meme that you want to share, and you go to save it and it says, yeah, we want to save this image as completely nonsensical file name that you'll probably never find again after today. Based on, how about this? Don't say anything if you've experienced that. Okay, great. Sounds like anonymous, or I'm sorry, unanimous. Yeah, everybody's experienced this. Along those same lines, this one kind of hurts a little bit more, but we all have a drawer of old mail that may be important. I can't tell you how many manuals I have for things I don't own anymore, recipes for things I will never end up making. And we kind of started to feel this a lot more in COVID because we were sitting at home in our messes a lot more. And we thought it kind of all comes together in this image as a summary. So this one, hopefully, we can't necessarily, we're not guilty of this on our own work computers, but I don't know about you, but I have this folder on my desktop on my personal computer that is just kind of like, please get this out of my way. And so we kind of thought, all right, this is a thing that exists. We're all feeling this pain. We should do something about this. How do we try and solve for this? In this case, untitled folder would be something like to sort, to organize, whatever the case may be.
Archive. We use
Archive. So, what are we doing to solve it? And with that, we wanted to focus on really not creating another task, which we'll go into more detail later. But really, like, how do we make this easier for people who feel like they're completely underwater, who feel like they don't want to take on another thing to manage, another task, another chore on the weekend, something like that. So the way we summarize it, we did a lot of like internal introspection, like pulling apart the problem, looking at other tools that are out there, like everything from like Adobe Scanner to like Google Drive, like tools that we either use at work or at home, and really pull apart like what are the pieces of those that we really want to solve for. And it's making sure you have a single secure space. You're able to find things once you put them in there. They're not just in a folder that says to organize later. You can get organized quickly, because that's the worst thing is when you're getting started, is when you're saying, how do I color code this? How do I tag this? Blah, 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 blah. And then you're able to, most importantly, act. So you can find it and act on it if you need be, or if you need to. But with that, Mason, would you like to do the big reveal?
Yes, I would. So right now we have a code name for it. It's called Closetbox. And basically the premise is that it's organized for you, not by you. Because a lot of the gap that we also found is that people have tools out there that can do this kind of thing, but people aren't doing it. And really, this talk is going to be less about our kind of concept and what we've been building, and more about how much has changed in the past couple of months and how much it evolved through methods that we've brought back into our day jobs. But really the logic of it is that you put stuff into it and then it can categorize your stuff across themes and it prioritizes and logs it. And we have a couple of different vehicles we've tested to kind of figure out how to get into it. But basically one of the main concepts was that you could actually just upload screenshots into it and it would sort through them using different technologies that we've been messing with. So like in this case, you know, you can take a screenshot of like a vet bill due and it would put it in your semi folder. So really it was kind of trying to figure out ways to help people organize. And what we learned is that over and over, people want to organize things in different ways. People want different methods of organization. So a lot of the solutions had to change over the past few months. And one of the big things is that we have moved away from building a discrete solution and started to move where the problem happens. We want to talk about like both the growth of us building an initial solution and then how it's changed so much and what we've been doing pretty loose and fast to do that. And on top of that, this is all stuff that we've been doing in nights and weekends. Like Cameron's product manager, I'm a product strategist. This is stuff that we've been doing in the edges. And I think that's really relevant to kind of what we do in product a lot of the time. So what we're really here to talk about today is kind of how can we take best practices from Agile and apply it to research methods? And how do we do that for our side project that we've been working on? And also how do we do that now in our day-to-day? Which is what this side says, obviously. I'm gonna make myself way bigger. I think I should be bigger. And I think I should be over here now. Right here. And it's something that I think resonates with not just us, but people in general when it comes to research and product. Some firms have really good and fantastic research practices. Some of them are siloed out. I work with a lot of different companies. Cameron's worked at a lot of different companies. But a big thing is like, do we have enough time to conduct research? So when 1 out of 3 people in product can affirmatively say yes, what are we putting out into the world? Like what are we trying to do? And I think sometimes it's still pretty good, and the no being low is good. And this is from a Department of Product survey for 2020 of product managers. And then the other thing is that, you know, what is the level of this research? Is it effective? But also, if we're spending all of our time, you know, firefighting versus doing planned activities, research is traditionally a planned activity. So we're a fraction of a fraction. So we need to have research methods that really not only help us make better stuff, but also help us fit into our already chaotic product cycles. So we often think a lot of things about how Agile applies to the delivery process of software. And we want to talk about what it means to the delivery process of insights and research to inform your product. And it's not perfect. A lot of what we're going to talk about today are research methods that, you know, when they go to certain scales, it's not going to make statistical significance. But it can get you through a release from something that's terrible to something that's actually pretty useful. And there's a bunch of ways to categorize this. And at one point, the miniVAte site had these 4 Agile principles that we resonated with in our process. And I want to kind of go through how we applied the lens of these through our research methods for this product and why it's been so significant to making codename Closetbox into something more useful and more relevant. At some point, the miniVAte website had these on it, and I like these a lot. Experiment and learn rapidly, deliver, release early and release often. And perfect is the enemy of good. And basically, through our process with Closetbox, we've actually been able to kind of take these concepts and apply different ways to test and learn quickly with research. So Cameron, where are you? Where'd you go? Are you here? Are you invisible?
I am.
There you go. I missed you. So I'll go through first. So experiment and learn rapidly. Experiment and learn rapidly. You can tell that I've had a little bit of coffee this morning. You know, find the customer, determine value, you know, find and test things. I think traditionally when it comes to software, either at enterprise or startups, we think of things like design thinking, which is a fantastic activity, doing design sprints, going through these kind of laborious things. These take time. We think of things like A/B testing, which is really good if you have an established audience, an established product, or if you've integrated a thing like Optimizely into your product suite. But also it's difficult to do. If you don't have the capabilities to do it, it can be hard to run these experiments. We think of, and this is, in-app surveys. We can learn really quickly from these types of tools, which is funny because as a product person, I love in-app surveys because we get like real-time feedback or at a certain level, but also I feel like I hate them now because everyone's doing them. And that's just my side rant to the audience of miniVAte Virginia. Why, if we're all making this harder for everyone, because now no one wants to take these surveys. Sidebar. So Cameron and I had to experiment and learn rapidly. We've had a ton of money. And we had to do it really fast. So Cameron, you want to go through some of these?
Absolutely. So what we did first is a shotgun approach. So we really wanted to like just get stuff out there and get some answers. So rather than start to build off assumptions or even design off assumptions, like we really just wanted to get answers from anybody. Like some people we sent out to friends, we sent out to family, sent out to peers, and it was really just kind of like a super top level survey that even the survey evolved over time. We had some top level questions up front, realized we wanted some more answers, we had some more answers throughout, but it gave us some really, really good data around like what are the current habits, what do people need, what do people think they need versus what does it seem like they're okay with. So like, for example, we asked them up front, like, have you used any of these common tools? And we left kind of an open-ended answer at the bottom there, which some people, it was great also because this gave people an opportunity to reflect on what tools they used and what habits they had. Some people, it was not a great thing to be able to reflect, as you can see by the bottom answer there. But others, you can see that like Google Drive and Dropbox and calendar apps, like these are pretty prolific across the board of who we researched. And to that end, like in theory, do they have what they need? But what we found, like once we really dug in, because just because you use a calendar, just because you use Drive, does not mean you're actually organized. So if you look at this example, like how do you actually keep track of that digital stuff, like whether it be scans or actually stuff that's coming in digitally native, like emails. Some people are using like taped together survey or spreadsheets, drives, folders. Some people are mixing media between like Google Calendar and a drawer in their desk. So it's really, really, really interesting to get to like, what are these things that people pull together? And the thing that we found over and over and over, like within the survey, outside the survey with direct interviews, is that there wasn't one recommended thing, one recommended set of tools or set of habits, set of processes. And some people were just kind of like winging it, going with a hope and a prayer here with, get up, pray that crypto hasn't crashed, which is obviously very timely today and this week, go to work and then watch anime like a responsible adult. Often people were like, I don't even want to think about it, out of sight, out of mind. Also, without me in this circle, it's like a halo. That's nice. It's like a nice
That's good.
classical painting.
That's how I would describe you, Cameron, a classical painting.
Thank you. But yeah, so getting just this quick feedback around open-ended questions, just kind of like be in place with people was really helpful with understanding like potentially processes that were all over the board, tools sourced from all over. And what we were able to do, if you think about what Mason was just talking about, where focus groups and discovery is harder to do, we still use this as a way to dig in. And we're able to dig in with some of those processes by things like on the left, this happened to be somebody who responded to the survey. I said, hey, did you respond with this? Like, it sounds like you. And their first response was the George Michael from Arrested Development, kind of shameful. But I, dug in with like, okay, explain a little bit more. I'd love to hear like why you have this suite of tools, why you have these processes. I also met somebody in the park at a safe distance, kind of talked them through like, hey, can you share some screenshots with me? To really dig in with like, all right, this is really, really interesting. Can we share this without being in a room, without being, in other situations that would not have been safe for COVID? And AirDrop is your best friend. So I had lots of screenshots airdrop from a remote distance, sent to us over text, whatever. And really just digging into like what you're describing. Can you take a picture? Just take a picture of whatever. It doesn't have to be fancy or anything like that. On the left, You can see someone's solution where they're using notes, where they literally would say, using 3 emojis at the top makes it easier to scan as you're scrolling through and trying to get to the information you need. So that's the only reason there's 3 emojis is for scannability. So scannability is obviously very important, but they never search, those sorts of things. There's some dates in there. Then on the right, you have a more interesting, this is my dad's approach, which is tracking taxes mixed in with TV and VCR and DVD documentation. Also, I would like to point out, he has 2005 taxes, but it's crossed out, and it's actually 2014. I don't know if that's quite a jump. But also, you can see in the bottom left of that image, it's also a cord storage place. All this to say, like using these types of tools with, whether it be simple surveys, whether it be meeting up in a park and talking through it, or just airdropping, sending us screenshots. This was invaluable, like absolutely essential in understanding the broad breadth of what is possible, what's out there. So that way we could even start from square one, from a reasonable square one that's informed by what people may actually need, rather than assuming, delivering, and saying, does this work for you? Because that would be a lot of time wasted potentially.
And I think with experiment and learn rapidly, the other part of it is that we would go down paths where we were looking into technologies that we wanted to integrate or try, and we had to keep going back and trying to figure out where can we figure out if this matters, or how can we experiment this before we even invest in doing that. And it wasn't at like a month-to-month level, it was like a day-to-day level. And again, our methods, probably a little more rigged lightly, but they did answer a lot of questions, and we didn't pursue a lot of paths that I think we could have gone down. And it kind of relates to the next one. Deliver. So again, we usually think through deliver, at least in my case, when I think about it, I think about things like Jira boards, sprint cycles. I think about iteration planning, like how are we going to get software out the door? And that's very important in what we do. You have to actually build things and get them out in the market. But the other thing is that we both had a privilege, but also the ability to kind of step back and constantly think of like, how can we deliver on research, again, in the margins of our time outside of things. So we had to create just enough, either technology, prototypes, or whatever to get feedback on it. So we were constantly iterating on Figma prototypes and getting them in front of people. We were, between like days, we would update them dramatically to add features that people requested, to get a sense for what they liked and didn't like, to get a sense for what made sense from an interaction model. We were constantly trying to find new ways to test and get things in front of customers to get a sense for how they would want to interact it. And once we get, and this is traditional prototyping, but once we were able to get into a rhythm of constantly putting new ideas and new content in front of people, it became very easy to start to shape up an actual pipeline of what we would need to build or develop. And really, again, we were able to learn a lot so quickly because we were constantly thinking of like, how can we be, have agility both in our software side, but also our research side. Cameron, you want to talk through these?
Yep. So the other side of that, like not only like capturing new like screens and deeper level interactions, but the other thing that really helped with research that I think can get overlooked at times is small personalization, just small bits of personalization. So it may be hard to read this, but what this says is your dog Luna is overdue for services. So the idea here is that this is a notification from the Closetbox codename app. But when we showed this to 3 different people, we showed 3 different dog names, and it was their specific dogs. And that's not huge. And honestly, that took us like 2 seconds to change it out. But that little bit of immersion gets you from feedback on just a visual to actually feedback on the interaction, because they're suddenly like, oh, okay, this is for my dog and I'm doing this. They don't have to make that leap because you're already making that for them. And with the deepening level of interactions, with adding screens as we kind of learn from people, and with adding that personalization, we're able to take a relatively simple wired up Figma prototype. I mean, this isn't a significant amount of screens compared to what we probably see in our day-to-day, and show this with small tweaks here and there to a ton of people to get a ton of feedback. Because with doing, and I'm jumping back here for a second, with doing little pieces like this, where you're helping them with that mental leap, they're asking more questions about deeper level interactions. So that means they understand it, they're willing to use it, they want to know what's going to happen next, which is so important.
And I think back to the deliver thing, it wasn't like one-off, like we're doing a user research lab, this quarter or this month. It was, we were talking to people. We had a goal for ourselves that we were just going to talk to people at least twice a week. And it was constant iteration, like, which I think is very similar to like the Agile methodology when it comes to software releases. Is keeping things consistent and in a rhythm.
Definitely.
Sorry, again.
No. So it really, using those tools, Figma, link screens, a few animations, and even that was potentially more than we needed, but we wanted to put in specific animations at important points where you can, like, literally, if we see this animation here, this GIF that we're looking at, this is the entire bread and butter of what the experience was as we captured it, which is taking a screenshot, sharing it to the Closetbox app, and then suddenly Closetbox can take the information that it needs for you to know when you need to know it. So animations are not necessary, but things like that, personalization, animations, wherever the case may be, can help people at pivotal moments understand what they need to understand. And with that, Mason already started talking about it, but releasing early and releasing often, like making sure that as you're putting together, as you're getting to a point where you're starting to realize, like, what are the important points that people are focusing on? What are the things that are worthwhile? Making it real, but also making it really, really simple. So when you think about, like, traditionally what release early and release often could mean, we hear MVP every single day. Now you hear about like MVP 1, MVP 2, but the idea being that, like, what is the smallest version of this? How do we prioritize the features that we add to an MVP 1, MVP 2, wherever the case may be, and avoiding waterfall. Mason, do you want to take these next couple slides?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, again, traditionally, like, release early, release often is very focused on the actual end user release, and that makes a ton of sense. So and I think it's graphics in the last talk, but it's getting to the right first release for your customers is actually going to provide value. It's having a roadmap that is prioritized, so you can have a cadence of work and a pipeline of work that is relevant to the customer. And I think it's also, and this joke might not land, but I thought it was pretty good. But, like, so you have a waterfall. We don't want to be in a waterfall environment, so we want to avoid waterfalls. So we avoid the Noid waterfall. And I think it's a banger. But basically, it's like we want to avoid backing up a ton of software releases, so we're releasing every 6 months and losing that customer feedback. And those are, like, very real, very true things for software. But in our case, we had to even go a step back and try to release earlier and release often and just build enough to constantly gauge value and feasibility. Go ahead, Cam.
And so what we ended up doing for that, because if you think about it, people thus far have seen Figma screens that are linked together, some animations, things like that. This is kind of when we took a step back and wanted to actually, like, figure out what people need to know day to day. And so we used a couple of things. So first thing, Google Forms, really easy to use. You can pull it, make it really simple, add questions, different types of questions. And so the questions on this are, what is it? Upload the thing, when's it due, and what type of thing is it? So some light categorization that we can use then to contextualize it for them down the line. With this form, and I don't want people to get nauseous when they see this, but we used AppScript, which is another Google tool, and basically, like, pulled together different hodgepodge pieces of scripting to take that form's input and then with a script categorize it based on what was entered, and display it when we needed to. That, in conjunction with using a script for Gmail, allowed people to basically, like, hey, if you label something as a box doc, a closet box doc, when we run the script every so often, we'll take it, and that we've taken it because we've relabeled as box done. All that's fine and dandy, but if it's not usable, it's not worth it. So the last point, and here you can see an example, is we took one of these submissions. This one is actually from email, understood the information, scraped from the email, took the attachment, and then added it to the specific date when it was needed. So in this case, it was a mortgage payment. There's a receipt, an invoice for it, and it was added to April the 16th, which we were able to pull and contextualize for people. So relatively lightweight. I mean, we didn't build anything significant to get to this point, but what it allowed us to do is really, day to day, Mason and I were able to, and our significant others, which, God bless them for their patience throughout this whole process, like, how would you do this? Because we've been thinking about this for months, but hey, if you have this tool, if you have this magic ability to turn information into a to-do at a time, what would you use it for? So forms, sheets, calendar, all things that many of us use today, and then add it with app scripts. And I promise you, if you look out in the app scripts community or Google scripting community, you can find at least parts of what you need to get started.
I think the big thing with this too is we're trying really hard to figure out what is the absolute minimum, again, over and over, that we can build that hints to the value that pieces of this product needs to hit. And a lot of things, like we would keep doing these releases and try them out with us or with our peers. And it was always quickly, we could tell what was resonating and working and what we should just avoid or drop entirely. And again, we kept coming back to things like automation, things like categorization. And we didn't have to really custom build much until we started to like hone in on those pieces. So the next theme, the final theme for Agile. Oh, I'm good. Perfect is the enemy of good. So again, in our classic rhythm, I think when it comes to software development, when we think of perfect being the enemy of good, we think of things like, avoiding scope creep. And like, how can we avoid making this thing too big, spending too much time noodling on it? Are we over engineering it, over solutioning it? Have we created a solution in search of a problem? Or we think of like, how do we know when we're done? And using gates like definition of done to prevent us from over perfecting or from making a clear line in the sand. The other part about perfect is the enemy of good, I think, is that we think about ways that we can release it in a good state and hot patch it later. Which is it's all very true. But I think when it came to the research and to help kind of the direction of a product, we had to constantly reprioritize, not necessarily what is the perfect thing we could build, but what's the perfect question we can answer next in our process? What's the next thing we need to know about the product, about the experience, about the usability? So in our case, we would always kind of rotate on 3 questions at a time. So one example of like, is this useful monthly, weekly, daily? What's the most important stuff to keep track of? Is this a standalone solution or something on top of existing tools? Because as we gave people, discrete versions of it, whether it's a prototype or kind of like web versions that we would build, people wanted to constantly integrate it back into their existing suite of tools. And that challenged us to think of a lot of creative ways to bring it, maybe it's not a discrete thing. Maybe it's a stand-on or an add-on. So Cameron, go ahead.
So when we were thinking about the standalone solution still, one of the tools that we used is called App Sheet from Google. And this is, depending on what feature set you want to use, it's free and they have plenty of templates to use. And essentially, like, we were able to give people a dedicated link, a dedicated place to use, was essentially what we were imagining. So what you can see is that we used enough of the styling of the designs from Figma so you can recognize it, like give it kind of a specific feel. They can still upload their screenshots, say what this is for, when do they need it. We actually, even at this point, didn't even have logins at this point. Obviously, we're keeping internal testing. You wouldn't want to do that anything externally if it's sensitive information. But you can see there's a drop down there for whose is this. So that way, like, we could give this out to multiple people to use and only show them what they need to know without building like a whole user account system and everything like that. And allowed us to ignore the random icons there, but that were just kind of out of the box, but allowed us to at least like give people the presentation of like, hey, here's the next thing you need to know. Here's the gathering of things that you need to know. Here's everything you may need to reference over time. And it wasn't anything particularly sleek. It didn't obviously match the Figma designs one-to-one, but allowed people to kind of, rather than us hovering over them as they use this tool, they could use it in their own time, and we could be on the back side of it looking to see how they're using it without us just like our eyes as spotlights on them as they used it. And like Mason was saying, it wasn't perfect. It was enough. In fact, I'm still getting errors when things break, which is great. Lots of errors because we just, we put together what we needed, but it helped us really, really learn through App Sheet, again, App Scripts, putting these things together. a really important question that we were able to answer, which is the people don't want to use another app. The folks who are having trouble organizing don't want to have another task. Don't want to have another thing to do. They want it to be done for them, like Mason was saying, with the tool that they have. So our focus now is on meeting them where they are. So if you remember, we were talking about like scripting with Gmail, with Calendar, things like that. Also like tools like Notion for people that are kind of type A-ish, like type A, like they want to get better at what they're doing, but maybe don't want to come up with their own solution entirely. That's what we're focused on now. And we wouldn't have been able to get there unless we were able to put in people's hands and see whether or not they're coming back to this thing.
Because there's another world where we had just buckled down and tried to build a thing, and we would have probably gotten the same learnings by the end of the day, and invested a lot into working with our friends that can do things with machine learning or OCR, which is a path that we're still messing around with, but not necessarily a discrete solution.
Sure. So for you, what parts of this process can translate to other orgs? Like Mason was describing, like some of this stuff was us just flying by the seat of our pants, like making things work during our nights and weekends, bugging people we know, annoying our significant others, wherever the case may be. But we still think there's lots of this that can be translated and we should bring out of like this COVID situation. Like once we're either all back in the office or once we're like changing our different ways of work, wherever the case may be, there is plenty to this that I think we should all take from it, which is really getting the product in people's hands, like focusing less on things like Optimizely, like Mason was describing, and A/B tests and things like that, that are potential barriers to getting instant feedback. And really, like if there's somebody in the office who's just even somewhat interested in what you're doing, or somebody in the neighborhood that you can just kind of throw a screen in their hand and get feedback, do that immediately as fast as you can. Even if the screen is not polished, it's not per branding, it's just kind of 2 buttons and a description text. That is potentially incredibly useful to even understanding if you're going in the right direction. And to get out of the building. I mean, of course, you want to make sure that you have alignment. You want to make sure your team's all set. You want to make sure other stakeholders are feeling good about this. But sometimes keeping research within the same building is dangerous because it can be an echo chamber. So get someone else to respond to this. I cannot tell you how great it was when my sister-in-law looked at what we were building and she was like, yeah, I just don't want another app. Like I really appreciated someone outside of my, the circle that knows that we were working on this saying something like that, because it was what we needed to hear. But on that note, Mason, I'll throw this one to you.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that where we've been able to channel it back into kind of some of our practices, both for the stuff that we work on, it's more active and less precious, I'd say. So really trying to get, what do we need to know about the feature? What do we need to know about the behavior? What do we know about the outcome? And not necessarily, what's the scale it needs to be as effective as possible. But also still thinking of like, what are the demographics that you need? Who should you be talking to? Who are the cohorts? And I think working demo is a relative term. I think there's a lot of ways you can test software without it fully functioning. Obviously there's things we talked about today. You can build POCs with things like AppSheet. But even if you have like a working UI layer and the backend's not wired up, like getting that in front of people, and getting those feedback on terms and how it fits into their lives is so critical, especially while the hood's up and you're still working on stuff. And really trying to be like, again, I think these Agile principles are so relevant to software delivery, but it should be also a big focus in how we inform the product and how we keep the research moving. So with that in mind, I also have 3 books that we think are really good and relevant to this. Probably the best book I've ever read on talking to customers in general is The Mom Test. It's a fantastic book, and I think it really, I think, demystifies a lot of the customer research. I think as someone that does a ton of customer research in my job, I think there is a skill to it, but also I think anyone working in software products should be able to talk to users and understand that type of feedback and how critical it is to the work that we do, especially if you're doing customer-facing software. Just Enough Research by Erica Hall is another great book. I think there's a term in that book that's fantastic, and I think it's still very true, but there's also a time and place for it. And she calls them, oh gosh, why is it escaping me? It's quant. Basically, it's a term about people obsessive with quantitative metrics. And she has a good chapter on how it is incredibly relevant when you have a feature that's going from like, when we already have 300,000 users, we need to push up, and that's very true. But if you're doing a new feature, just getting those first 5 or a new extension is as good. And then finally, Sense and Respond, which I'm sure is a popular book here in this audience, but just how you can constantly get that feedback loop continuously. And I like this book's take on research as a continuous cycle, just like the Agile development process. And with that, I'm going to make myself really big again. Ooh, I like this. I think this is cool.
It's like Gulliver's Travels style.
Yeah, cool. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Oh.
you. You gotta do the
Alright.
circle. Come on.
My bad.
And also, like, in the spirit of research and feedback, I will put a very small survey in the chat if you guys don't mind filling out. It's 3 questions and a half. But on that note, survey, and please feel free to ask us any questions about anything that we went through, any experiences that we didn't cover that you're wondering about. But yeah, thank you everybody for coming and listening.
Okay. So you say putting that survey in the chat?
I think so.
I see it.
It should just be a Google
Anybody
form
not
link.
see it?
Oh,
May just be me. No,
we
fairness.
purposely said it so that you can't see it, Gil.
Yeah.
It should be, it says me to everyone, so hopefully it's in there.
Does anybody else not see it? Being open, yes.
Weird. Sorry about that. Here, let me see if I can send it to you directly.
Now I just got it.
Weird. Okay.
Perfect.
Hey, there's testing, getting feedback, adjusting.
Yeah, great, wonderful. So yes, thank you, Mason. Thank you, Cameron, for this amazing presentation and your journey of going through with this product and your everything that you've learned and sharing it with us. Do people have questions or you'd like to ask here to Cameron and Mason?
I can make my camera not a small circle.
Okay. Well, I think, well, you've answered every question you could. No, this is great. Once again, Mason, Cameron, thank you very much for taking time to share with us here everything. It was amazing. So we'll give people some time back. Start an earlier lunch if they want. I also want to mention that after lunch, around 1 o'clock, we're going to be having a thank you and a raffle. We're going to be raffling over almost yeah, a few $100s worth of items, some nice items in there. So come on back after lunch, and we'll see you all then. And we'll start up again after that with the channels. Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.